Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Logo Design How to Do It Right workshop. My name is Aaron Carpenter. I'll be your host today. A little background on me. I was the developer and designer behind OnlineCounseling.com. I've been working with therapists for a number of years after I met Joe Sonic on Practice of the Practice. We did his brand design and a redesign of his website, sponsored a few of the podcasts, and appeared as a guest speaker a few different times, and went to a couple of his events. So just through those types of connections, we've, done projects and connected with so many different therapists all over the world. And part of what we wanted to do with this series is start to give you just a bunch of high value information up front on how to do some of the foundational building blocks of starting a practice into growing it and then scaling it into a group practice or an alternative reciprocal income sort of solution. So today's presentation is focused on stage one, foundations, and it's reevaluating your brand and logo. So without further ado, let's dive into it. So this guide is available on the site, and I will make this available too in the follow-up email and in chat for all of you that are following along. This is our way of saying how to do it right, not because our way is the perfect way, but we've done it hundreds of times. So we know what goes into a great logo for a therapy or mental health practice business. So just as a brief introduction, the goal of this presentation is to get you in a spot where you can work with a designer. So I'm not going to be trying to teach you how to illustrate or build the logo yourself or anything like that. If you are planning on doing something like that and you have some artistic abilities, that's totally cool. Everything that I'm showing you today will still be applicable to your process. It'll help you get your head in the game. But if you're not doing that, which is probably most of you, then this will give you all the tools and building blocks you need to more effectively communicate with a designer and give them some really good ideas to run with, which will make the end outcome of what you're seeing back from them so much better. So today we're going to go through the importance of a good logo. We're going to talk about what the anatomy of a logo is so you can start to get your nomenclature right and know how to talk with a designer. I have some tools inside of this tool. One is a word association guide that'll help you kind of get the right words together and that help kind of describe the idea. And then we also have a design brief, which is a series of open-ended questions that walk you through the whole idea itself behind the practice and what makes you unique and all of that, so that you can kind of get all of these creative materials together to be able to go and do a new logo. We'll talk about mood boarding a little bit as well, which is a super helpful exercise, and then I'll touch briefly on hiring a designer and what that looks like. So a great logo connects with the audience. One of the common mistakes that I see our clients make is trying to pick something that really works for them or resonates with them. And while that works on some level, because usually your practice when you're starting it is mainly you, and so those two things are in line, it's not always in line with who you want to work with. So let's say you focus primarily on postpartum or trauma therapy. Your, let's say, bubbly attitude, hypothetically, might not be the perfect brand to resonate with that type of person so that they feel drawn to it. And I'm not trying to say that we should make something that you're not comfortable with or don't like. On the contrary, I think that you'll always end up with something that you like because you're part of the brand design and logo development process. But I always kind of pull clients back to consider the audience first. You're really making the logo and the brand of the practice for them. So think about what would resonate with them first and your personal preferences second. Quick anatomy lesson of a logo. There's really two main types of components to a logo. The first is your logo mark. That's the symbol. So Nike swoosh, the swoosh is the mark. Nike is the logo type. So you have a logo mark and a logo type. Usually this is your name or your practice name as the logo type, and then some sort of symbolic mark that helps represent the practice as a whole. If you have a business name, in this case Social Bee Clinic, then of course doing some sort of bee or some sort of symbol that represents that. So as I said before, a great logo is something that resonates with your audience. Part of the exercises that I'm going to show you today are going to help you understand how to start to define that audience and your own practice. So don't worry if you don't quite know what this is yet. We're going to figure that out for you in the workshop. And then what a logo isn't, it's not something that you think is cool. Again, personal preferences are kind of a yellow flag there. Even though you should like it, it shouldn't be just something that you like. And it's always going to typically be the inverse of a good logo, of course, but like a good logo is going to have a good story and a why behind it. So a good logo isn't something that's like flashy and just seems kind of cool, but doesn't really have a why or a meaning behind it. So the first guide that I have for you is this mind mapping guide. This is a very simple guide that splits up different boxes for your audience, what makes you unique, your voice, and how you communicate. If you have a group practice or a small team, think about it in terms of the practice, not yourself. So what does your voice look like? And then your therapy style. So your approach to therapy might be more evidence-based and more task-oriented versus exploratory, let's say. I want to kind of touch on voice here for a second because defining your audience is pretty straightforward. You may work with young adults or, as I said before, like postpartum or something like that. So you can really start to identify who your audience is, broad brush. What makes you unique is not your CV or your education necessarily, but maybe a personality trait if you're a solo practice, or for your group practice, some approach to your therapy, not in the clinical sense, but like how you approach clients may be different than other practices. So that would be that. But voice is interesting. This I find most challenging for clients to try to do themselves. So when you think voice, I want you to not get stuck on thinking things of like, well, I'm empathetic and I'm a good listener and all those things, because every practice is. So that won't help set you apart. Focus on the things that are different. Maybe you're kind of like a no BS type of a therapist, or maybe you drill right to the point, or maybe you're much, much softer than that. Maybe your voice includes faith-based therapy, and even though it doesn't necessarily in all sessions, that is an option. Those would be the types of things you would want to put down here. So think as you're going through this mind mapping exercise about what makes your practice unique. And then what you can often do if you're trying to name your practice outside of your personal name, which can be recommended, and we'll have a different workshop on naming and branding, but you could potentially do that here. So you could kind of look at all these different words and combine different words to come up with a two-name or single-name therapy practice. The next tool that we have for you is a design brief. Every professional graphic designer is going to ask you for a design brief. They'll typically have their own tool, but as long as you have filled one out, they're going to do so much better. And so some of the options that I'm going to provide to you, especially lower cost ones, they're maybe not necessarily going to ask you to brief. They'll just ask you for some ideas and then they'll run with them. But there won't be any thought really put into it in the place where it's most important, which is before you even get started exploring things. You really want to think everything through so that you can stand on that foundation. If I know what the idea is, I just need to see it illustrated in a way that'll make sense. So this design brief is been built to do that. So when you click that link, just click make a copy, and this will make a copy in Google Docs for you. And then this is an internal tool that we use. So you'll see client name and business name. You can just fill this in for yourself. I have some explanations on, as you're going through, what to do with these two bulleted lists. The first is identifying themes. So themes are kind of like emotions. You could think of like, for different practices, those might be things like group healing, if you do groups. It could be something around participatory or task-oriented or action items or something like that. Just the idea, the kind of feeling behind your practice and how maybe clients might describe it. The ideas are a little different. So the distinction here is that an idea, as you're filling this out, if you get like a burst of inspiration on a specific thing that you could articulate, like, what would be perfect for this practice is, this sort of face with the mind kind of in these different colors in a sort of fluid way or something like that. That would be a specific idea that you should include here. And these are just to kind of at the top of the brief help you start to organize what would be a good possibility and what won't. So I'm not going to read through all these questions, but I do want to kind of point out something that I point out to everybody when they run through this brief through our agency. There's no right or wrong answer when you fill this stuff out. Sit with each question for just a little while because these are open-ended questions designed to kind of explore what your practice and idea and brand could be. So some of them could feel kind of difficult. Sit with each one and give a thoughtful response to each one, but usually no more than a paragraph unless you really feel like it's important. Keeping your answers succinct is pretty critical here because if a designer is going to read through it, they're going to be looking for kind of what the essence of this idea is through your brief. So if you get real long form with it, it's going to make it very difficult for a designer to find that. The other thing that I'd mention is there is no right or wrong answer. So if there just straight up isn't a good answer for some of these questions, just either leave it blank or write, I'm not sure how to respond to this question. That's okay. Not all of them have a good answer. For instance, we'll ask practices, do you have a slogan or tagline that you use? Not all of them do. And it's not really important to make up one to fill into this brief. It's just important that if you have it, to include it so that the designer can be mindful of that. There are a bunch of fun questions at the end, including if, first thing that comes to mind, if your brand was a celebrity or a movie character or a storybook character, who would they be and why? Sit with these. Some of these last ones are added in the end on purpose because we've structured this so that you start to think more creatively and get your head in that space. And then when you get to some of these more difficult questions where it would be hard to come up with an answer to that cold, probably. Sit with it just a little bit, like I said, about the questions. Really kind of think about what does first come to mind. Even if the answer seems completely ludicrous to you, it doesn't make any sense, write it down and then start to think about why you got there to that one thing. There might just be a personality trait of that character or something that's really important if a designer is trying to figure out what the attitude is of the logo or what the feeling is that you're trying to evoke. So that'll be included in the guide as well. Now I want to kind of talk about some terminology. Part of the point of these tools is to help you speak in a better way to your designer and a more comfortable way. One of the things that we notice when we're working with clients is that it's very difficult to put your finger on what's wrong with a design. And that's not surprising. I mean, designers, develop that skill over years and years of experience, the better that they get. And it can be even challenging for one designer to communicate to another what is wrong, unless they're, an expert in their field. So what helps is to give you some tools when you're talking with a designer so that you can kind of think about things in continuums and articulate better what might be off about a design and why. And this is going to help you avoid the whole I know it when I see it type of a thing, which is basically just asking a designer to throw darts at a board until they randomly hit a bullseye blindfolded. So terminology. Think of everything's relative on a continuum. So masculine versus feminine, or loud and bold versus soft, formal versus informal. Take note of all of these different things. These aren't the only ones, but these are really common ones that we use a lot in design, and it helps kind of orient things. So maybe you're a private practice that only works with women. Maybe those women are high achievers, and maybe they are, basically executive level or entrepreneurs. So you might want the brand to be more feminine leaning, more loud and bold, potentially, if that's typically the disposition of these people, probably bright and hopeful, and maybe because they're high achievers and they tend to associate success with coin, maybe it needs to have a little bit of a luxury or luxe feel instead of sort of plain and simple. So that would be a way to immediately get a designer in a whole different space about what would be good to represent your practice. And that part of that is identifying that audience and letting them know, here's who I work with primarily, here's what, here's some words or word association of what I feel like would be good for the logo. Okay, so let's now talk about mood boarding. This is an optional exercise, but it's usually very helpful for people who are designing getting material together for someone to design a logo. Mood boarding is essentially, if you haven't heard the phrase before, it's basically just collecting a whole bunch of stuff, and think like a scrapbook, and you're just kind of slapping all this stuff in there that has some sort of inspiration to it for the idea that you want to build. So I have a few different sources for you. These are some of our favorites. The first is Dribbble. You probably haven't heard of this one before. It's more of like a designer repo where designers show off work and get critique from other designers and accolades and stuff. But it's pretty handy. If you just search for, say, like therapy logo, you'll get a whole bunch of different like brand design and branding around therapy. Now, of course, therapy is sort of synonymous in search engines with like physical therapy or something like that. But you can just look through these and find some interesting ideas. This one is more of like a line drawn design, and it's got almost kind of like a Celtic feel. So maybe you're a practice that has some, I don't know, Irish or European Irish connection to it. Somehow that's in the brief. Maybe some sort of Celtic spin on the brand makes sense for your practice. I don't know. You'll know when you fill out that design brief, but that would be a good example of maybe something to pull based on that. Let's try to find another one. This one has like leaves in it. It's called Elevate. But this kind of has more, anytime you're using leaves and stuff like that, it's got a little bit more of an organic feel. So maybe you're into some holistic methods, or you like to combine that with your therapy. If that's true, then maybe you want something that feels a kind of earthy and organic. So I don't want to get into too many specific examples. I just want to give you a couple so that you can kind of get a sense of where I'm going with this. Mood boarding can be as simple as creating an account and saving each of the concepts that you like to just one little bucket. Or you can like right click and save these things, save image as, to a folder on your computer to be shared with a designer or for you to look at later. Another great place is just Google Images. It's important at this point to point out, I'll just do therapy logo again. It's important at this point to point out that you obviously don't want to copy any ideas, and that's not what we're talking about here. It's about collecting a whole bunch of ideas, similar to like if you were working on designing the inside of your home, like interior design. You'd have all of these different like swatches and different things to reference for your idea. So here, just save things that you feel like are kind of on point. Hey, look, there's that one on Dribbble that we had just searched for. But save things that have elements that you like. I also might advise that you save things that are completely wrong, but definitely differentiate them. Maybe save them in a different folder so that you can show the designer more this, not this. And that can help them steer to true north on what the better idea should be and why. It also might help a designer, if you're working with one-on-one with a designer, it might help them ask some additional questions of you and of the audience to better understand it, given that they can see what it shouldn't be, especially if that seems in line with something that they would like to try. And the last one is Pinterest. There are other resources. These are just 3 common ones, but this works similar to Dribbble, where you have an account, so you can just pin things to that account. And you can search for anything. So you can search for therapy logo again and just see what you see in here and start to save those things down. There's some interesting, very meditative Zen stuff coming up immediately. This I would describe as very feminine, right? So, keep that in mind and build a big mood board to reference. It can be incredibly helpful. There's no certain number that you should save, but a good rule of thumb is like 5 to 7 great examples, and maybe like 3 to 5 stay away from. Too many might confuse a designer, because there's just so many ideas, it's hard to actually narrow in what it is, similar to what I said about the design brief. So you can save as many as you want down, but then go back through them and call out or remove the ones that aren't great examples until you get down to about that number. Okay, so we're doing awesome on time. So let's talk about hiring a designer. There are a few different options. Well, there are a bunch of different options, but in terms of for a therapy practice, your options, they're really kind of in a couple or a few different stages. We broke it up into 2 here. One would be like a low budget solution. 99 Designs is totally reasonable. Um, they can also help with like not just illustrating the logo, but if you want to wrap in like business cards and stuff like that too, they can absolutely do that. Basically, the way that this works is you tell them what type of industry that you're in, and then let's see if we can just do. Well, I was looking for health, but I don't see that in here. So we'll just do we'll do internet since I'm an internet developer. That's fun. So we'll say a name. We'll put in mental health marketing in here since that's the name of our company. It'll have you pick some stuff. Now, what it's doing for you right now is basically design briefing you out automatically. Okay, so you're picking some of those examples to represent what you feel like the logo should be. And I bet at this point you can kind of appreciate what I was saying, that, you know, at this point, if you hadn't done the briefing that I was talking about and kind of go through some of that work up front, you're really not going to know why you're picking any of these things. And so, you know, not knowing whether or not it should be a mascot or a picture or just a word mark can make it difficult to give an accurate brief even to a service like this. But anyways, if you do all that work up front, then picking this stuff will be a lot easier for you. So we'll just pick this, let's say, and continue, and it'll ask us what we want. I don't get paid anything, by the way. This is not like an affiliate link through 99 Designs. It's just an option for you. Once you pick all this stuff, it'll take you through a short form where you add a little bit of information, and then you start a logo contest. And I believe their lowest cost is like $499 or something like that, maybe $299. I can't remember exactly. So that's a totally reasonable way to do it. Basically, what will happen is a whole bunch of designers from all over the world, especially places where there's high talent design, but the dollar goes a long way, will present options to you. And you can pick those and leave a little bit of feedback, do a round of revisions, and then select one to move forward with. So that's one option. It looks like we wrote $299, so I think that's where it starts. Second option would be to work with a freelancer agency, which would be like us. Obviously, I would be remiss if I didn't at least plug ourselves somewhere in this workshop, but this is a better quality option for a few different reasons. I mean, one is we focus in this field, so it's a lot easier to speak the language and ask the right questions. Another reason is with 99 Designs, you get a few simple files, but you don't get like a professional design package. A professional package would include things like vectored files so that you can go straight to print or embroidery or anything like that. A vectored file is just work super clear, no matter how big or small it is. You also are working with a designer that's mindful of how the logo is going to be used. So if you do plan on doing certain types of advertising, or have it, like I just said, embroidered or something, you're going to want the logo designed in a certain way where, let's say, it doesn't have too much detail so that when it gets real small, you can't even tell what it is, or it's too much of a picture, so when you scrunch it way down, you can't tell what it is. So for those reasons, it's totally worth the price to work with a professional designer. We're not the only ones, but we price our logo design at $950, and our process takes roughly 1 week, going through the brand design process, or excuse me, the briefing process, and then the design product to the finished product. So that's it for what I want to show you today, so that you can kind of get equipped with these tools to I know a lot of people are starting their own practice now, or maybe you're looking at refining your existing brand. These are all really great exercises to go through, even if you already have a logo but you're thinking about reinventing it. And just as a reminder, this is all part of our private practice growth system. So this was stage 1, where we covered topics like website, call funnel, organic SEO, branding, that sort of stuff, just the basics that you need to have your practice online, especially now, post-COVID, when we're doing telehealth and that sort of a thing. So I'd like to wrap it up there. I do see a couple of... No questions for this one today, so that's cool. So with that, I'll leave you guys to the rest of your week. I will be sending a follow-up with a recording if you RSVP'd to this, so you'll get the full recording. You will get a link to this guide and all this material right after the call today. But I appreciate you taking the time to join me today, and enjoy the rest of your week. Until next time, I'm Aaron Carpenter with Mental Health Marketing. Have a great week.